And we are live. It's Dr. J in the house with Evan Brand. Today, we're going to be talking about gut function and histamine. We see this all the time with mast cell, histamine disorder issues. And we're going to be diving into the gut function and how it correlates with histamine. I mean, a lot of times our histamine bucket can get very easily full with dysbiotic bacteria in the gut making histamine. Certain viruses can also impact our gut microbiome to make histamine. And then obviously mycotoxins in the environment or colonized mold in the gut can also make us a histamine factory as well. So excited to dive into today's topic.
Yeah, man. Here we are 10 years later,
Dude,
still
it's
rocking.
nutty. It's nutty, man.
I need to look back at the history to see, because I'm looking back at my episodes 2013, 2014. It's literally been at least a decade we've been pumping out this stuff. So I hope you guys
January.
enjoy this.
Yeah, January 15. So we're right there. Here it is, December 24. So we're right there knocking on 10 years, man. That's crazy.
Awesome.
I love it. I love it.
And people still need help. I really question whether we've put a dent in the healthcare system or not, or, if we've helped enough people or not. And then, regretfully, I went to Sam's Club like a couple of weeks ago, and I was like,
Mhm.
we are nowhere close to where we need to be. My God,
No.
rows of M&Ms and Tootsie
Mhm.
Rolls and Skittles and just all the garbage and the Christmas chocolates. I'm like, dude, we are so far behind still. My
The nice
God.
thing is there are more options out there. People want to get stuff out there. There are more options outside of just like real Whole Foods. There are more options, which is good. But the problem is you still have to be educated and you still have to make a decision to choose it. And the kind of healthcare that we provide with functional medicine, nutrition, people have to want to take accountability for your health. It's very easy in healthcare to be the victim and say it's my genetics and this pill is going to fix it for me versus taking full accountability for your health, right?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard when you're tired and you're in a deficit of sleep and a deficit of nutrients and neurotransmitters. It's very easy. I mean, just us being off for the Thanksgiving break and having our kids with us all the time,
Hmm.
losing the gym routine, not having the
Hmm.
babysitters on hand because they're out of town, that sort of thing. It's like you see quickly just how things can derail. So you really got to stay you got to stay grinding. And I know that's overwhelming for people. And today's topic is about histamine intolerance. And when you have a histamine overload, it's going to make you more anxious and more irritable. And it's going to make you more frustrated. And it's going to be more challenging to just get through your daily life because you're reacting to potentially fragrances and foods and buildings. And I mean, I've noticed a difference in my mood just in certain buildings. If I'm getting hit really heavily with air freshener or toxic Fabuloso floor cleaner, or let's say you walk into a place that's got mold. You can have mold rage. You could have irritability, dark mood. All the environmental pieces, as well as the internal pieces, these all fill up your histamine bucket. So I just want people to visualize that it's not just what you eat, it's what's already brewing in your gut that's going to drive up your histamine, which is then going to affect your mood. So I just want to call that out in a couple of different ways because most people, when I say histamine, they think allergies. They don't think mood, behavior, they don't think irritability, anger, frustration. But when you have mast cell or histamine intolerance, you are likely to be a little bit of a crazy person. You're going to have a shorter fuse. And we hear that all the time. People that just have, that's actually one of the intake form questions I have is, do you notice you're more irritable or agitated than usual? 9 out of 10 people say yes.
Mm. Yep, exactly. And again, when we talk about histamine, it's a big buzzword where people, there's like mast cell disorders, right? What's the big fancy name of that mast cell disorder? It's like an acronym.
Yeah, mast cell activation syndrome,
Yeah,
MCAS.
yes, MCAS, right? And so I don't like diagnoses that don't point to a root underlying cause, right? And so when you have diagnoses, a lot of times it's describing an effect, but then it's your job as the clinician to then connect it to the root cause, where the conventional medical doctor is just throwing a bunch of drugs at it, right? So in the conventional medical world, we have kind of our first generation antihistamines. This is going to be like our Benadryl that makes us really tired. And then we have kind of our second generation ones that are going to be less sedating. These are going to be like our Zyrtec, our Claritin, our Allegra. And then we have like our H2 blockers, which are going to be more like the antihistamine H2 like acid blockers. These are going to be like our Pepcid AC or Zantac, right? And then you go into steroids, which then cause blood sugar issues, weaken bones, create, other problems because we're exacerbating cortisol, screwing up our adrenal cortisol rhythm. That's going to be our prednisone or fluticasone, right? And then you have like your actual drugs. These are like your cromolyn, these kind of things. And we're not ever dealing with a deficiency of these medications. And none of it gets to the root underlying issue. So if you have mold in your home, or if you have tons of dysbiotic bacteria and colonized mold in your gut producing histamine, that does not fix the underlying issue. And so I just tell patients it's okay if you use a medication as a kind of stopgap to give you palliative relief, but just know it's still not fixing the underlying issue, and just keep your eye set on fixing the underlying problem.
Yeah, pull this up for us.
Yeah.
So this is a 2022 paper in the Journal of Nutrients. It's titled Intestinal Dysbiosis in Patients with Histamine Intolerance. And it goes on to discuss here that even if you do not have DAO deficiency, so DAO, diamine oxidase, by your small intestine, and I think the kidneys are pumping out DAO as well. Is that right? Kidneys, small intestine.
Yes, kidneys. A lot of times they'll get DAO from like kidney glandular tissue, and so then you'll get kidney in a desiccated in a glandular capsule, and that helps with the extra DAO.
Okay, so your body makes DAO, but this paper is saying here that even if you have bacterial overgrowth, a higher abundance of histamine secreting bacteria, which we can measure on the stool and the urine. This would include things like staph, which we see all the time, proteus, which we see all the time, enterobacteria, clostridium bacteria, which we see a lot of. It says here that you can have adverse effects even in individuals without a DAO deficiency. So some people may be familiar with this idea. If you've been in functional medicine, natural medicine world for a while, maybe you've been prescribed DAO supplement where you're
Mhm.
taking a pig kidney extract to then help you break down your histamine. This can be helpful. I used DAO for a while. I
Mhm.
do think it takes the stress off the body in a way. It's almost like a little bit of a crutch because if I'm DAO deficient and I boost my levels, I do have less histamine reactivity. So I do think it is helpful to it's almost like a backup generator, for maybe your car or your house. It's like you can if your main grid is down, your main DAO production internally is down, you can supplement DAO and then build your levels back up, and then you can tolerate more foods, more fragrances, etc. But it's when you have underlying gut dysbiosis, which is 9 out of 10 people we test have some level of gut dysbiosis, your histamine bucket is already full, even if there's no DAO issue at all. So this is why this is a little geeky, and the average person is like, what are you talking about? But if you've taken DAO and not fixed your histamine issues, it's probably because you didn't go deep enough. That was almost as bad of a crutch as the Chromalin or some of these other things you're mentioning.
Yes, exactly. And again, the chromalin or the and the steroids have a lot more side effects, right? They can cause a lot more problems. So I mean, chromalin essentially is it's anti-inflammatory, right? It's anti-inflammatory, and its major mechanism is stabilizing mast cells. But I know that there is it inhibits the degradation of mast cells, but it also has like I think a chemotherapy kind of use as well, doesn't it?
I don't know about that. I haven't seen it.
I'm not sure exactly, but I know it's I have seen it to have significant side effects as well. I do know it's very expensive.
Pull this one up
But
too.
yeah,
This is
but also yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I wanted you to pull this one up too. This is looks like Korean or Journal of Korean Medical Science, April 2023. So I mean, this is already over a year. There's probably a new paper since, but this is just one that's readily available, which is talking about long haul syndrome, meaning you had the virus and you did not fully recover. And it's saying here, gut dysbiosis correlates with long haul at 1 year after discharge. And they looked at all these people. They talked about the specific infections that they had. And the
Hmm.
conclusion is right here, gut microbiota may play an important role in long haul syndrome of the virus. So we see this all the time. We know that the ACE2 receptors in the gut got affected by the virus as well. So if you're somebody who's like, hey, like I had a guy yesterday, he's 20 years old. He's like, man, everything was fine until I got the virus. And now everything's messed up with my gut. And now I'm reacting to all these foods. So there can be a domino effect where there is an insult to the gut, like a virus, like a pathogen, a parasite, a big bolus of infection that can just derail the whole thing. But a lot of times, this is a slow brewing problem that's been accumulating over years. Just stress, not enough sleep, food sensitivities that you're eating. You're just gradually filling the histamine bucket. But it can be a more of an acute thing too if you have a big exposure.
100%. We want to always really get to the root underlying issue, right? And so gut is going to be a big one. Hormones are going to be a big one. We also see it with women who are estrogen dominant and or have low progesterone. Estrogen is going to make us more histamine sensitive. So when we have high levels of estrogen, and also when we're chronically stressed, guess what happens? Oh, we're going to have lower progesterone because progesterone can pinch hit for cortisol, right? For anti-inflammatory, right? So progesterone is a big one. It's very anti-inflammatory. It does help mitigate histamine effects. And if you're estrogen dominant, then that's going to increase. But essentially, progesterone helps increase the production of that DAO, so it helps break it down. So when we have higher estrogen, that's going to counteract DAO. So we're going to have less DAO because we're estrogen dominant. So we have high estrogen, less DAO, and then low progesterone as well. So we can be estrogen dominant as well as have low progesterone. And that's going to impact our ability to handle histamine too. And regarding the cromolyn, it's a lot of times given with chemotherapy to mitigate chemotherapy side effects. So not
Oh,
the
wow.
chemotherapy, but again, it's going to be a histamine degranulator. And that's the major mechanism. Now, we have some natural things we can do as well. And again, when we talk about natural histamine support, it has to be in conjunction with getting to the root cause because it may not be a root cause. Probiotics can be very helpful, right? That's if we've already cleaned out the gut first. If you're adding probiotics in on top of a lot of dysbiotic histamine producing bacteria like Klebsiella, Pseudomonas, Tetrabacter, that could make it worse. So on one side, probiotics good can be part of a root cause solution. On the other side, could make it worse. We can add in fish oil. We can add in stinging nettle. We can add in bromelain. We can add in quercetin. We can add in vitamin C. We can add in curcumin or magnesium. These are all going to have really good antihistamine, histamine degranulating effects. And DAO is also going to help with histamine in the environment or in the gut. And so we can also look at keeping high histamine foods out. Your citrus, your aged meats, your nuts and seeds. Those are all going to be good things. Your coffees, your teas, your alcohol. Those are all going to be big things that help lower histamine as well.
Yeah, I've got a free histamine guide. There's no catch to it. If you just go evanbrand.com/histamine, you could check it out. It took me a while to build it because I was personally testing foods on myself to figure out what's low, what's high. And some of this is based on a lot of nutritional journals and papers too. So just evanbrand.com/histamine. It's free. It's just a PDF if you want to look at the low, high histamine foods. I don't think you have to be on a low histamine diet forever, but if you're
No.
confused about food sensitivities and you're not sure exactly what you're reacting to, when you go low histamine, it's going to become more clear. So, for example, I love organic blue corn chips and salsa. That'd be like an amazing treat for me to have that with some steak. But I know that corn is going to be a higher histamine food. Tomatoes, peppers, nightshades in general, higher histamine. So that could flare things up a little bit where you'd notice brain fog. So look at the guide and just try to go lower histamine maybe for a month. And it's interesting you're bringing up hormones because a lot of the women that we are seeing could be in perimenopause. And so a lot of times, I think what's happening is they are already coming into this with hormonal imbalances. You're mentioning the estrogen dominance is getting worse. So it seems like in your 20s, this is less of a problem. Hormones are doing great. And then as you age, the hormone imbalances start to pop up, potentially decades of toxins you're walking around with that are xenoestrogen. So if you've got BPA and phthalates and you've been using conventional makeup, let's say you're not using natural makeup products for the last 30 years. Now you've switched to healthy, but all those previous years of xenoestrogen exposure from your foundation, your lip balm, whatever, that's just further worsening this estrogen dominance, which what I was reading here too, there's a paper talking about how high estrogen is actually inhibiting DAO. So not only, like you
Yep.
mentioned, excess estrogen is worsening histamine release, it's actually a double whammy. Not only is estrogen promoting more histamine, high estrogen is also inhibiting DAO. So it's literally like it's a double. It's a double
Yep.
whammy.
Because if you're estrogen dominant, you're going to have high estrogen, which lowers the DAO, but then you also don't have the progesterone, which also helps the DAO. So you can have both for sure. And like you mentioned earlier, let's say you have environmental mold, right, with mycotoxins. Well, those mycotoxins tend to be estrogenic.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you're driving up the estrogens that lowers DAO. But then guess what? Mold is very inflammatory. So then that's going to deplete progesterone and your natural anti-inflammatory capacity over time. So you get a double whammy there too, right?
That's wild. And the mast cells can become overactive. And so if you do get to a doctor that addresses this, unfortunately, just stabilizing the mast cells is not enough. Will you pull up this picture real quick? I'll pull up a mast cell just to show people because some of this is a little geeky, but
And real quick too, I have a article too, justinhealth.com/histamine. Just a really good article on the things that we're talking about regarding DAO and histamine. So that's a good supplement there as well. Let's pull that article up for you, Evan.
yeah, so here's a mast cell, and I just describe people. degranulation process. Look at these little
Yeah.
green boogers, is what I call them. And essentially, what's happened is whether it's hormonal imbalances, mycotoxins, pesticides. In that first paper we looked at, gut bacteria, and the second paper we looked at, the virus. All these things are promoting the degranulation of these mast cells. Think of it like a leaky balloon. The balloon is full of histamine, tryptase, and other inflammatory cytokines. Histamine is just the most infamous. And all these toxins and infections aggravate these mast cells, pissing them off, causing them to dump more histamine out into the bloodstream. So if you do come in with quercetin or perea leaf or NAC, we have a whole bunch of nutrients that we use to help stabilize the mast cells. That's wonderful. But these mast cells are being triggered by something. And so just taking the histamine supplement or the histamine medication is not enough. But hopefully visually this helps people.
100%. Yep. And then so when you look at your mast cells, right? You have your basophils are essentially mast. So basophils are in the blood. When the basophils go into the tissue, they essentially become mast cells, right? And then mast cells produce histamine. And inflammation drives histamine. And so when you're starting to reduce inflammation in your body via diet and lifestyle and healthy changes, um, that is going to allow these mast cells to kind of swell up. And so it's like they have this like histamine reservoir that's kind of like building, and it's used to like building up and then like, squirting out, building up, squirting out, because there's constant stimuli and triggers to do it, right? When you go look up that picture that you sent of that mast cell
Yeah,
that
I
you
can pull it
said
back
there.
up. Yeah, I pulled it back up for you.
Yeah, so pull it back up. There's receptor sites on that tissue. So you can see here. So there's IgE, right? So we have antibodies, immunoglobulins. These are going to be foreign proteins that are going to hit the receptor sites. This could be gluten. This could be mold toxins. These could be other food allergens. These could be fragrances. And so that's going to create immune reactions. And those immune reactions they're going to hit the mast cell. And then you're going to have this degranulation and histamine production down below, right? And so this mast cell is swelling, milking out histamine. But then now you don't have the fragrance, all the stimuli, your gut bacteria is getting better. So now it's swelling, swelling, swelling. And then let's say you have a bad day where you eat some gluten. You'll get this extended trigger response that's even worse than normal. And you're like, wait a minute, that was getting better. And so you have to let your mast cells and your basophils have time to kind of decrease the swelling so that histamine production gets less and less and less. And that takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, you can't fix this overnight, but you can't get out of it. Mast cells have some benefit, but it's when they're overactive, which is all too common in the modern world because of all the different things we're up against. And if you think about anaphylaxis, so anaphylactic reaction, that is a body-wide degranulation of mast cells. A lot of people know about anaphylactic shock. That's whole body mast cell activation. Okay, we're not talking about anaphylactic reaction. That is the most extreme manifestation. And that's where you're getting histamine. You're actually getting serotonin. You're getting tryptase, chymase. You're getting a lot, TNF alpha. You're getting a lot of inflammatory cytokines all at the same time. That's life-threatening anaphylaxis. That is a mast cell problem. So I just want people to know most people can have a story or a relative they've known about having an EpiPen. That's the extreme mast cell. We're talking day-to-day mast cell that's going to cause flushing, dizziness, headaches, itching, joint pain, maybe you break out on your face, you have a rash, or your neck, you're just scratching. It could be something like that. It could be brain fog. So mast cell issues don't always have to be, quote, allergy symptoms. I remember when I was exposed to mold and
Mm-hmm.
3 tick bites in the
Mm-hmm.
same summer, I would just have just weird, this weird head issue as well. So it doesn't always have to be a allergy type symptom. So just understand that if you go to your allergist, what they're probably going to do is they're going to try to test you for what is called mastocytosis. So mastocytosis is the clinical diagnosis of mast cell activation, but it's pretty rare. Mastocytosis doesn't really occur. I don't think I've ever seen mastocytosis clinically, maybe a few cases, but your allergist is going to say you don't have mastocytosis, therefore you probably don't have mast cell activation, and they're going to blow you off. Just like when you go to the gastro doc and they say IBS and then they send you out. It's hard to get these conventional doctors and allergists to recognize mast cell activation. In most cases, you need a more functional medicine-based practitioner that's going to help you address this. And Beth O'Hara, rest in peace.
Yes.
Uh, she was someone who I interviewed her a few years ago. She interviewed me a couple times. We did a couple things together. Anyway, she was a natural medicine practitioner, and she was running a mast cell website, and she struggled a bunch. Like, I thought it was odd that when we did an interview together, she's like, "Hey, I'm better now, but I can't go in a restaurant for more than 10 minutes before the TVs start making my head spin." I was like, "Whoa, you're not healed. Like, let me help you." So anyway, long story short, this year she ended her life. So
Yeah.
I want to call that out to say that, unfortunately, even practitioners sometimes get so deep in the hole with mast cell activation that you can have thoughts like that. So if you feel like you're in a dark place, feel free to reach out. Reach out to the hotline if you need to talk with someone, because when you're suffering and you've spent tens of thousands of dollars, it can be overwhelming. And you could think there's no way out. I react to everything. I can't eat anything. I can't go to any buildings. I've heard the extreme manifestations of it. And I was pretty bad. Like 2019, 2020 ish. I was pretty deep in the hole with my reactivity, and I'm much better now. So I just want to encourage people to stay alive and get some answers. Run a few labs. You're not going to spend a ton of money, and you'll be able to get to the bottom of this thing. And we'll be happy to help you create a protocol so that we can walk you step by step through exactly what's going on and then how do we fix it. And if we do it in the systematic way that we've done for the last combined between us both 20 years, thousands and thousands of people, we're going to take care of you. So if you need help clinically, Dr. J is available worldwide at justinhealth.com. And I'm at evanbrand.com. We do one-on-one consults around the world. So no matter where you are, we can get these labs to you. We have international distributors. Once we get the data, we'll look at what is driving this histamine intolerance, and then we'll just pluck at it, just pluck away at the issues we find.
100% agree, Evan. That makes a lot of sense. It's just like gluten issues, right? You can be gluten intolerant and gluten sensitive, but you go to your gastroenterologist complaining about gluten, they're going to see if you're coming down with celiac, which means you have to have this 80% wearing of the microvilli in the small intestine, or you have to come back with these endomysial transglutaminase antibodies. And you may not have that much internal autoimmune destruction or tissue destruction, but you could still be sensitive. It's the same thing with mast cell histocytosis, right? Now, labs we can do is conventional wise, they're going to look at serum tryptase is one. They'll look at various histamine metabolites is another one. It's like the N-methyl histamine is a big test that they'll run, usually N-methyl histamine test. They'll look at that one. They'll do the serum tryptase. They'll run a DAO enzyme test. Again, I'll just like to look at do an elimination diet, see how much for histamine and for autoimmune, see how much things improve. Look at the gut. If we have lots of dysbiosis and we can get that gut better, that could be another big one. There are also some genetic tests that we can do for histamine too, but that's going to be the KIT mutation analysis, looking at the D816V. But again, I much rather look at more functional tests that look at things and try, looking at the root causes and moving those levers first and seeing what happens symptomatically downstream. Because you can say, okay, there's histamine markers coming back, but it doesn't tell you the root underlying cause. And so I always want to get to the root underlying cause, change that upstream, and then symptoms downstream will change.
Yeah, well said. And this is why you could chase blood labs and not
Mhm.
really get the answers you need. I mean, how many times have you, I mean, I know it's in the thousands. How many times have you seen this massive file of blood work that a new patient wants to send in, and you're like, I'll look at it, but man, there's not much to extract from that compared to the functional labs.
Oh, absolutely. And I've heard, patient come in last year. It was like, oh yeah, my doctor said, there's histamine issues. I have mast cell issues, but I can't get healed. I can only manage symptoms. It's like, well, if your doctor's not looking at the root underlying cause and you still have all these fabric softeners and you have mold in your environment and your gut's dysbiotic and you have low levels of beneficial bacteria and you're estrogen dominant, sure, because you're not getting the underlying issue addressed. And so they're just looking at treating the downstage symptoms. And so when you go to your conventional doctor, understand if you ask them what the root underlying issue are and what are the diet, lifestyle, and external environmental factors that are driving it, if they're not listing those out and breaking it down and looking at your diet and looking at your hormones and looking at your gut and looking at mold and things like that, then they're not going to get to the underlying cause.
Yep. I know. It is so common and so sad. If you're listening and you're still using fragranced laundry detergent, what are you doing?
Totally
Please.
that. Or these candles, like these candles that have a scent in them, or like the little trees that you put in your car and things like that. Like I put like an activated charcoal like bag in my back of my seat that just absorbs smells. Like have an absorber that absorbs stuff, not something that covers it up with crappy chemicals, or at least do something that's a little bit more gently essential oil based. But even that for someone that's sensitive could be a problem.
That's
Even
right.
natural essential oils. That's why you're much better off with a good air filter and a good charcoal adsorber that's going to suck up toxins. Use a clean wash soda that's baking soda based to clean your clothes, or a free and clear type of detergent with no scents and odors, and do a rinse cycle with wash soda afterwards to get any residue of anything out of the clothes is also very helpful.
And you got to be careful, like thrifting clothes. I mean, my mother-in-law, I don't know where she went and got this, but she ended up having some sweater and she had used unscented laundry on it. But the previous person had used scented stuff, and those things are impregnated into the fibers. Like if you're buying secondhand clothes or hand-me-downs or thrifting, like you're trying to find vintage clothing, I mean, mycotoxins can stay in the fibers of clothing. So you're likely buying moldy, contaminated clothing with fragrances in it. So I don't recommend it.
Do you remember those starter sport jackets in the 90s? Remember those starter?
Oh,
Remember
yeah.
those jackets? So I got a hand-me-down one, like this is like early 90s. It was a Florida State Seminoles jacket. And I remember I had washed it like many times. I could still smell the fabric softener in it and the dryer sheets from the previous person that hand me down it to me. I was like, wow, that's crazy. That smell will not go away. It's nuts.
The only way you'd be able to would be if you were to get some chlorine dioxide tablets, put it in a Tupperware, like a giant Tupperware container, and just basically bomb it with chlorine dioxide. It would probably eat everything up, but it's still a battle.
I find that the best thing for me, because I had a moldy shirt, I just, I washed the shirt one time and I just forgot about it for like 2 days. So like a wet shirt stayed in the
Yeah,
dryer for 2 days and it came back and it was like mildewy. I washed it a dozen times, couldn't get it out. I did an 8-hour soak with a cup of wash soda in there, and that's pulled all the smell out. And wash soda is just baking soda for your washing machine, and that pulled all the scent out.
that's great. And for
Yeah.
people like, why are they on a tangent about laundry? Well, because scented products activate the mast cells. In fact, that's one of my nemesis, scented laundry. I mean,
Bingo.
when I was at my worst, I'd have contractors come over and it's like a bomb in the house of fragrance. I mean, I was like, whoa. I mean, I would get dizzy from it. So the fragrances are a huge problem. And your limbic system and your olfactory system is so primitive. We are designed as humans to react to a fragrance in a millisecond, to know what's a threat, what's food, what's good, what's poison, what's gas leak. Like we're designed to have a pretty visceral response to fragrances. And so this is why you want your environment as pure as possible.
I agree. And also, it's on you all day long. So if you're breathing it in all day long, you're just activating these immune cells that shouldn't be activated. And again, histamine's there for a reason. It's there to vasodilate and allow more immune cells to come in. Because I bang my elbow against the side of my desk, it's going to swell up. There's a histamine reaction that's good, right? It's driving blood in there. It's driving immune reaction to clean up that inflammation. It's when it's chronic and over the top, that's when we have a problem. And so we want to understand, not necessarily a bad thing. It's when it's chronic that's the problem.
All right, we could go all day, but we got to run and jump on some
Yeah.
calls here. So
Yep.
let's wrap this up. But I want to share this real quick. This came out published from the National Institute of Health. Wow, you guys are waking up. Congratulations. September 24th, 2024, published certain chemicals may trigger early puberty in girls. And this is related to a paper saying that in soaps, detergents, and lotions, these fragrances are actually jump starting the hypothalamus, activating the anterior pituitary. Researchers don't entirely understand how the body triggers this cascade, but receptors found on neurons in these regions play a role. And they're saying here that these fragrance compounds coming from all this BS that young teenage girls are marketed towards, like lotion, soap, detergent, all this fragrance BS, it is literally driving early puberty, which in
Mhm.
the 1800s, puberty, I looked it up, published papers on this. 16 years old was when girls used to start puberty,
Yeah,
start menstruation. It's down to like 8 or 9 years old, depending on what
on the
paper you
low
look
side.
at. It's
Yeah,
insane.
if you look at the average over the last 100 years, it's about a 2 to 3 year decrease, and it's just all these xenoestrogens through the plastics, the phthalates, the various parabens and estrogen mimicking compounds. Also, like let's look at a lot of these scents or molds. These are all going to be estrogenic. And then the more that inflammation we create, the more that lowers progesterone and increases estrogen, which then we decrease our mast cell stabilizers on the progesterone side, and we increase it on the estrogen. So then it makes all this histamine stuff just more prone and more prevalent. Now we're more environmentally sensitive.
Yep. It's
Yeah.
an epidemic problem. So please reach out if you need help. Dr. J is available at justinhealth.com. We'll get some function medicine labs on you, figure out what's going on, and make a protocol, including diet, lifestyle, everything we need
100%.
to do to fix you. We'll do it. Myself, Evan Brand at evanbrand.com. Please reach out. Don't hesitate. We have people that come in, they're like, oh, I've listened to you guys for 6 years. I'm like, why'd you wait so long? And they don't have a good reason. It wasn't even money. It was just like they're just listening. They're just not ready to dive in. So like if you're on the fence, do it. Let's make 2025 the year where we find the stuff that's wrong with you. When I look at society, I'm like, wow, we're weak. We're sick and weak. It's not good. We got to start pushing these people to get the data and to fix themselves. I mean, who's going to be the garbage man if everybody's chronically fatigued? Like, come on.
I agree. I totally agree. So evanbrand.com for Evan, Dr. J, justinhealth.com. Again, we put some links in the podcast. Evan, what was that link for that article? evanbrand.com/ what?
Oh, yeah. The histamine guide, just evanbrain.com/histamine. It's just a PDF. You could download it and check it out. Put it on your
Good.
phone, look at the foods, and try to go lower histamine for a month. Report back.
Yeah, justinhealth.com/histamine for mine, all free stuff. Just check it out, guys. All right. Appreciate you guys for being there. Thanks for the chat and have an awesome day, y'all. Take care.
Bye.